We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for our panel, and remind you at the end to please turn in your evaluation form to Will in the back of the room. And without any further ado, I will hand it over to Kate Kemker to get us started.
Good afternoon. I'm Kate Kemker. I'm from the Florida Department of Education, and I'm responsible for technology learning and innovation and what we're doing with technology with the school districts in particular, and how we're moving with the E2T2, the enhancing education through technology funding that we have, and kind of giving guidance on where we want to go with technology and what they need to be doing. I'm very excited to have the panel that I'm in charge of today. It's just tremendous to have the different experts and very specific in different areas. And I think it's going to be exciting to hear some ideas about transforming with technology and what technology can do. We're going to have Karen Cator from Apple Computer, Bill Logger from Acuity will be speaking, John Chubb from Edison Schools, and then Catherine Moyle. We are the first panel to have an international guest. Catherine Moyle will be talking about what's happening in Australia with technology. And I think it's real exciting to hear what they're doing as a nation and how they're moving and the focus that they have. Because as you've heard, there's been a lot of discussion about looking at math across the nation's science and comparison, and I think you're going to see some beginning parts in this presentation to hear that there are some things that we as a nation need to look at and be doing. Okay, a big pop quiz first for everybody. Can everybody identify the four items that are in this? Okay, which ones? We got a TV. And how many people remember that you used to get up to change the channel? Okay. We also have, that is a radio, in case you couldn't remember. And then there is the turntable with those vinyl LPs, and we used to get them on those things. I still have them too, but they're not worth anything. And then we also have a typewriter. Anybody know an interesting fact about the typewriter? The QWERTY keyboard. It was built to slow us down. It was built so that we would type and we would slow down. What I always find interesting now in this day and age is we continue to develop technologies, new thumbnail technologies using thumbs, and yet we still use that keyboard. I'm not sure why we want to keep slowing us down, but it's just interesting to think about. So I wanted you to think about that that's what most of the kids in today's generation have never seen before. And yesterday, Margaret Spellings made this comment, but it was eloquently also said by the former Secretary of Education, Rod Page, who said, "We organize schools and provide instruction is essentially the same as it was when our founding fathers went to school. We still educate our students based on an agricultural timetable in an industrial setting, yet tell students they live in a digital age." It's the comments that are made at all the different technology conferences we go to about kids powering down and kids coming into the classroom and they have to power down to come to the classroom. And so today's conversation is going to focus on how some things that are changing. Some of the students that we teach now, and this is research-based evidence, that these are the students that are coming in, that they are called the digital generation, the millennial generation. There's lots of terms for what they are. But the students are coming in multitask. They're ready to go. They're ready to listen. They're thriving on changing, on playing games, on doing different things. And it's a good thing. I mean, they're very excited about learning. They're risk takers. Contrary to what we think, they really are wanting to make those changes. And so they are the nation, which is very interesting to think about. They're born between 1982 and 2002. They are the largest generation, 36% of the total population. 31% are minorities, more diverse than the adult population itself. They have come of age along with the internet. They don't know when you didn't have the internet. The information has been universally available, and they're able to do it all the time. They're the ones that want to have the answer right away. They want to Google it, they want to find it, and they want to know what the answer is, and they want to be able to decipher it down. Their method of communication is not like what we just saw in the beginning with the television and the radio. This is their new mode of communication. This is how they're talking and working with each other. It's through videos, it's through web pages, it's through blogging, it's through podcasting, it's through Facebook. How many people have become members of Facebook? Actually, very interesting. I went ahead and did it. I didn't know if I would, but I did. And it's amazing how fast my former students got hold of me. It was kind of a neat way to have back that touch as a teacher when you leave them, 20 years ago, and they all wanted to find out what Ms. Kemker was doing. So it's kind of neat way, but it's a new method of communication. They just want to say and touch out, and it's touching virtually, which is so different than what we used to have before. But the big thing and the big information of what we're trying to move as a nation and as a state in particular is called information and communication technology. In 2005, the organization which we compare ourselves with math scores, with science scores, and with other scores, they established what they call a policy for information communication technology. And they said it's the interest, attitude, and ability of individuals to appropriately use digital technology and telecommunication tools to access, manage, integrate, and evaluate information, construct new knowledge, and communicate with others in order to participate effectively in society. Those are the skills that we need our students to be able to have. And what's interesting is that No Child Left Behind began to address it. It was the tip of the iceberg, and there were so many good things within No Child Left Behind for technology. If you would just search through, which I did, you can find lots of areas where technology is mentioned on a continual basis. But unfortunately, a lot of the district leaders and local educational agencies haven't realized what it said. We're supposed to have, actually, in No Child Left Behind, all 8th grade students are supposed to be technology literate by the year 2006. We're not there. And we're starting to be there, but as a state, what we're doing in the state of Florida is we've developed a performance tool so we can start to see what's happening. But there is a push, and unfortunately, a lot of people haven't looked at what was in No Child Left Behind. One thing that's also interesting is if you look down and she mentioned, Margaret Spellings mentioned the other day about not having a plan, and she's correct. If you look at every other nation that we compare ourselves with in all of the core subject areas, the United States is the only nation that does not have a policy for education for ICT. And that is concerning. Where are we going to take our kids to? What do we need them to be doing? How do we do that? And part of what the ICP policies are that Catherine's going to be able to talk about is about looking at how content is delivered, what's the gigabyte to the classroom, what is the different things that you're supposed to have, and that it's supposed to be done as a nation instead of just left up to different people to think what technology is. And that's why it's exciting to have this conversation and to listen to different viewpoints of what we need to be doing as a nation and where we need to be moving. So some of the essential conditions that have been found out that in order to move forward with an ICT or in order to have technology more fully utilized in our schools, we have to think about creating a 21st century classroom. What does that look like? The alignment of content to standards, the way in which it improves student achievement, and the professional development of educators and the vision for having that, not just in K-12 but in pre-service. And so it is real exciting that we have 4 distinct panelists that are going to be able to address each one of those issues. The first one's going to be Cator, and she's going to be talking about 21st century skills and what does that classroom look like.
Thank you, Kate. Oops. It's not going to fall over. It is going to fall over. Okay, so really when we first think about this, we have to sort of put technology in a context because the last thing we wanted to do is perpetuate kind of this thing about technology for technology's sake or simply because kids like it. So we really try to think about why do we need technology. So first of all, there are really 5 reasons why schools need to change, why it's different than it was even 10, 15 years ago. And the first that we've heard over and over at this conference is about global competition. The world is flat, our kids will be competing with other students. But the second is interdependence. And our students need to grow up understanding the role of what they do in a global society and the fact that many of the problems that will face the students when they reach adulthood are simply cross-boundary issues like global warming or viruses or some of the things that they'll be thinking about. The third reason is the workplace has completely been innovated by technology and the internet, and we all know that, and our schools really have not been completely innovated with technology and the internet. Fourth reason is that information is ubiquitous, right? We all know that. You're at a dinner party and someone, asks, who was the 16th president or whatever, you can Google that. You can find the answer. But yet these are still the things that we assess kids on over and over and over, and we make the most important thing are the things that they can remember in their brains, fact-based questions, the kinds of things that they could Google. So if the student Googles the answer on a test, is that being resourceful or is that cheating, and how do we kind of sort that out? So information is ubiquitous. We need to come up with new kinds of questions and new ways of engaging students in inquiry and thinking critically and problem solving and those kinds of things. And finally, student experience, and Kate really went through that. The experience of students outside of school is much different than their experience inside of school in most cases. So that's the fifth reason that we really need to think about our schools changing. So the second thing is that when we think about these students are growing up and they are really the CEO of their own personal brand, right? They don't think about it that way, and they're not going to think about it until, 15, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, someone's going to be running for governor or mayor or whatever, and someone's going to pull up their MySpace page from when they were 18 years old, and that will be interesting, but we know it's going to happen. So we also know that 26% of employers say they look at MySpace, Facebook, and Google to get information about prospective employers. Our kids in school today need to know that. So the fact that we sort of shut all this down at school and say, no, none of this at school, really means that we're keeping it sort of in a dark alley over here. And what we really need to do with these social learning technologies is shine a really bright spotlight and engage these platforms for building communities and student learning. Not easy to do, but something we need to do. And we know these kids publish. They publish all over the internet, and adults do as well, right? If we look at the growth in photos and videos across Flickr and YouTube and Facebook and all of these sites, we know that digital content, user-created content, is growing exponentially, and there's a place to publish for pretty much anyone. So when we take this to the workforce then, this piece is really about how the demand for skills has changed. And if we're going to raise a generation of students who have a place to make a living and really understand the kinds of skills that they need in order to be successful, the growth in things that require complex communications and expert thinking are on the rise. So how do we build school environments that let kids from an early age start practicing those things? Practicing complex communications, practicing how to think critically and expertly. And really there's a decrease in the kinds of things that we do a lot of in school, some of the routine cognitive drill kinds of things, some of the routine manual things. Those are the skills that are becoming less and less important in the real world. Mark Tucker's group, the National Center on Education and the Economy, published Tough Choices, Tough Times over a year ago now. And this is really the chart of if all goes well. If all goes well with education in the U.S., this is kind of how we can think about industry in 2015, right? That the routine work done by people and the routine work done by machines, well, those will be the things that will continue to be outsourced. And when we think about educating our students, we need to be shooting for that top triangle. That top triangle represents the creative work, right? It's the research and development, it's design, it's global supply chain management. It's all of those things that really do require expert communications and expert thinking. So the interesting thing about this is, however, as at Apple, we have ministries of education from around the world come into our briefing center, and I will tell you that all the other countries also are pointing and shooting for that top triangle and trying to figure out how to retool their education systems so they're training their students to grow up and be the people who do the research and design and global supply chain management and run companies. They aren't going to be satisfied to have us outsourcing our factories and our routine types of work to other countries. And further, if we look at creative careers, there's also a strong growth in creative careers when we think of things like advertising and marketing and promotions and broadcasting and public relations and photography and animation and filmmaking and all of these kinds of things. The growth in careers in this sector is definitely up and to the right. There's a lot of conversation at this conference about workforce readiness and the kinds of things that will allow students to be employable in the future. And I think that one big takeaway is it's a big, huge yes and. We have to do all sorts of things. We have to pull out all the stops and try everything, right? And so all of our schools have a certain set of the population, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 15, 20, whatever, percent of the population that tend more towards the creative work. They don't necessarily do well in our linear kind of education system as it stands, but there are things that we can do to engage these students in certification programs and becoming filmmakers and becoming animators and graphic designers and interior designers and photographers, and finding what really speaks to these kids, bringing those things into the schools and really giving them a career path with these things, not just kind of that extra end-of-the-day hobbyist sort of thing. So the Partnership for 21st Century Skills is a coalition of 30 members or so, 37 members at this point. It's businesses like Apple, Dell, Microsoft, Intel. It's foundations like the Verizon Foundation, the Oracle Foundation, many others. Lots of companies are members of the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. But it's not just companies. It's also organizations. The National Education Association is a member of the partnership and have been from the beginning. The American Association of School Librarians, the Association for Curriculum Supervision and Development, ASCD, Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, are all members, this coalition, equal members at the table to really set the policy framework for what are 21st century skills, how do we define these, and really build the groundswell of interest and understanding on what these skills are. So I'm going to run through this quickly just because it's a good backdrop for thinking again. As you think about these things, think about, can you teach these things? Can you really get at these things without technology? And how can technology really support the education in these areas? So first of all, the framework includes core subjects. These are the core subjects as defined by No Child Left Behind. Important? Absolutely. We need to be thinking a little bit more cross-disciplinary. And when we think about that, we think about those kinds of 21st century themes that don't fit neatly into any specific subject area, right? So these are the themes like global awareness. It's not just learning another language. It's not just learning social studies and geography and those kinds of things. It's all the skills, attitudes, aptitudes, knowledge that really allow people to grow up and understand their place in a global society. Companies are looking for people who can operate in a global context across the U.S. for sure and across the world. These other areas, these are some of the 21st century themes that again require kind of a multidisciplinary approach. The next set, the life and career skills, and again, I think we'd all agree these have always been important, but they definitely are part of the 21st century skill set for all students. All students need to be able to take initiative and self-direction, be productive and accountable, take leadership and responsibility. Learning and innovation skills. So again, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills really advocates that all students need to grow up with a sense of creativity and innovation. They need to understand how to apply creativity and innovation to their higher education space, to the workplace, and really just as citizens. Critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and collaboration. And these are skills, again, that I wouldn't say are new, but they're definitely more and more and more important as students need to be lifelong learners moving from job to job and really being involved in careers that we don't even know exist yet. One of the interesting things you should do sometime is go to your local college or university and do a survey of the majors and figure out how many of those majors weren't even in existence 5 or 10 years ago. It's an interesting list. And finally, information, media, and technology skills. Information literacy, obviously. We've got to get kids to understand information, how to use it, how to search it, sort it, etc. Media literacy is about how to communicate effectively with multiple media types, right? So it's not just watching TV and understanding what the commercials are trying to sell us, which was kind of our media literacy when we were in school. Now it's really how do I produce, how do I communicate, how do I tell the story with text, with pictures, with moving images, with animations. And then ICT, and I think the PISA definition there is about the best one I've seen. So that's the 21st century skills framework. Very quickly, the 21st century requires and rewards figuring out the right questions and using skills to solve new problems. It requires and rewards working in teams, working across disciplines, learning how to find, communicate, and apply information, how to take initiative and leadership in flat organizations, and take responsible risks. It requires us to manage time and commitments and be able to prioritize and work within flexible time segments. So if you juxtapose all of this against kind of how we organize our schools and how we set up our schools, these are not necessarily the things that the 21st century school requires and rewards for the schools we have today. Requires and rewards interacting in a multimedia graphics-based environment, and finally working with the left and right sides of the brain together. This is from Tony Wagner. He's at Harvard University. He's writing a book currently. He's been doing some background research on this, and he's been talking to companies and higher education institutions to really find out what is it that we're looking for out of this generation of students. So we're at Apple doing a quick project. We were supposed to talk a little bit about what our context is. We're doing a project called Apple Classrooms of Tomorrow today. 10 years ago, we did a lot of research around Apple Classrooms of Tomorrow, and now we're saying we really need to figure out how to apply that. So very quickly, all students need, all schools need to be able to articulate 21st century skill outcomes. The students do, as Mayor Bloomberg was talking about accountability, students need to be able to speak more and more fluently and be more and more accountable for their own learning. Well, they can do that if we tell them what is expected of them and if they can articulate these skill outcomes. They need relevant and applied curriculum, things that are in context that give them a sense of why they're doing it and why they're there. Informative assessments, and this is really the summative plus the formative, really inform our thinking about how students are doing. So it's not enough just to have summative assessments. We also need to figure out better and better ways, and I believe some of my colleagues on the panel will be talking about that. A culture of creativity and innovation. Again, as every community is different across the country, we need to be able to use that culture of creativity and innovation to solve problems on a local level. Every student in school needs a social and emotional connection, right? And there's a lot of talk here about mentorships and apprenticeships and all the different very creative ways that we can make sure students have a connection. And finally, every student needs 24/7 access to the tools and resources of the 21st century. And that's technology. So when we think about the promise of technology, what does technology bring? This is just a quick list, and there are probably other things. But first of all, technology does engage students. They use it outside of school. We need to use it inside of school. Technology allows us to personalize learning. They can have their personal learning path. They can be doing their own research and finding a lot of their own information. They don't need to wait for the teacher to find all of the resources to bring into the classroom. Students can be very engaged in that. Technology can increase feedback loops to students, to teachers, to parents. The kinds of technologies, even things like essay scoring. Students can write an essay, click submit, it will score it, and by the way, these intelligent scoring systems have slightly higher inter-rater reliability than when people score them. Those are the kinds of things that are available now. You can increase feedback loops, let kids know how they're doing. Making complex concepts visual. When you think about some of the high-level math and science concepts, the visualizations of those can be done with simulations and animations and the kinds of technologies allowing students to manipulate those. Making content accessible to people who have different abilities, learning or disabilities. Technology can do that. There are a lot of technology tools for that. And finally, access to experts worldwide, access to communities of practice worldwide, and we know students and teachers can publish to a worldwide audience. So those are some of the things that you can do with technology that you can't do without technology, what technology brings to the table. Okay, thank you.
Next is going to be Bill Lager to talk about what they've been able to do with technology and start to move and change in Ohio, in particular with the ECOT project.
Thank you. 10 years ago, or about 8 years ago actually, when we started Electronic Classroom of Tomorrow in 1999, and I told the story to Karen earlier, West High School in Columbus was the first Apple Classroom of Tomorrow. And it survived for 10 years, and Columbus Public Schools made the wise decision, knowing that it was considered the best program that had ever achieved actual real results in the entire programs that have ever been offered by Columbus Public, promptly closed the program. That same month, we elected to adopt the name, because I was involved with that Apple Classroom of Tomorrow. We selected the name Electronic Classroom of Tomorrow, so we stole your name. The reason was then we started the first statewide K-12 full-time online school in Ohio called ECOT, managed by Altair Learning Management, and we now currently have about 10,000 students. What we learned in doing that in Ohio we spent not a dime on advertising, and we decided to let come who may, and we wanted the kids that nobody wanted, and that's what we got. Basically, ECOT is 74% free and reduced lunch program, meaning we're the poorest school district in Ohio. We really are pulling students that school districts have sent to us and don't want back. Our first year we graduated 14 students, and we just recently graduated 1,200, the largest graduating class of a high school in Ohio. Of those 1,200 students, a good 850 had no other alternative for an education. 65% contribute to the support of their families, 40% were single-parent households, 32% special needs. So we were one of the first broad-scale schools to actually take a population that was difficult to serve students. As charter schools, that's what we got. Of course, we faced numerous battles and trying to keep it going, but we've been successful. We started the iQity Group, which is now a company under Teresa Berry, our president, who is here, and I hope you will introduce yourself to her. She knows more answers than I do. And what we tried 3 or 4 years ago is, how could we take these 10,000 students and take it to all 2.5 million students in Ohio? Because we had a personal belief that in Ohio we were making a big mistake. You were either a charter school or not, private school or public school, e-school or no e-school, and why couldn't you be a combination of those? And it didn't seem to make sense to us that a student sitting into a traditional classroom couldn't also be in a virtual school at that very moment. That the way that we deliver instruction and motivation, exactly the way Karen is indicating, is on the terms that these students are demanding it. It doesn't take much brains to figure out that what Karen's saying is true, but the kids have known it long before us. So we set about to say, how can we take what we've learned at ECOT back to the public schools who have fought us tooth and nail? Because our goal was not to be an either-or school, to not fight public schools. I personally don't believe, and I know Dave from the Buckeye Institute and I have argued and talked about this for a long time, I personally don't believe you're going to do away with public schools, nor do I believe you should. And nor do I disagree that what happened in 1830 when Horace Mann started the public school system. It's just we've got to realize that back since, I read Alvin Toffler in 1970, and he talked about prosumers. And I read that chapter because I'm not a bright fella and not an educator, and I read it several times, had no idea what he means. Well, I know today what he means. The prosumer is the person who produces and consumes their own education and materials. So these kids don't need us. They need the tools and the motivation we can give them and the resources. There's an old saying that our principals at our school would say that in the old days, get them to school and we'll educate them. Today we need to say, connect them, and they can damn near educate themselves. They know demand economy. They are setting our fashion styles. They have made Apple famous again. I mean, who doesn't know about Apple iPods and podcasts? But those are because they're styles. Those are things. They are demanding from us this digital world. It's not new to them. I actually believe they're born with a gene today, this group that Karen talked about, that's already equipped to do that. So our goal at iQity is how can we help school systems become more digitally smart? And we decided against the content business because what we felt was there were a lot of people in it. And there are scores of very good digital content providers as well as traditional publishers who are getting into the content business. But what we noticed when we looked at getting into the content business and decided against it, that something else is occurring. In the days when I grew up and TV was black and white, that's the truth. Let's see, a couple of you might have remembered black and white TV, okay. But basically with television, they decided what you would watch. A group of people in Madison Avenue would decide what the best shows were. They'd do some Arbitron ratings, but they pretty much decided what the top 10 was. David Letterman is famous for his top 10 lists. Everything we've done in society until this point have been based on those top 10 lists. That's all changed. If you look at Amazon and the old top 10 lists of what you would find in a bookstore, the old Walden books before the big Barnes & Noble, you'd get the top 5%. In general, it's pretty average stuff. Television was pretty average because you had to appeal to a very broad marketplace. Occasionally you got All in the Family or Mary Tyler Moore show that was funny, or Hallmark would put on a pretty good show, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. But generally it's average. That was the goal. But now that's not good enough. People want to pick their own shows and put them on TV. So what happened is the guys at Amazon, Netflix, they come along and they said, you know, it's funny because instead of offering the top 10% or top 10 sellers, let's offer everything that's available. Let's offer 1 million titles. And you know what happened? The other long tail of subjects available through Amazon, where they only sell 1 or 2 a month, constitute a far greater volume, 80% of their total revenue. And they don't have to discount those books like they do the bestsellers. So Tom Clancy and Stephen King get discounted. I wrote a book a couple of years ago to talk about ECOT, not because I'm smart and not because I'm an educator, but because we kept getting asked the wrong questions. Why are you trying to steal children, take their money, and profitize education? So we wrote a book. And I know what I'm telling is the truth because we do sell one of these every 6 months on Amazon. And yet somebody out there is buying them. We think it's our competitors, and that's fine. But you can go to Amazon and buy the book, The Kids That ECOT Taught, used copies for 80 cents, and they will send it to you. Now, I'm not encouraging you to do that. It cost me $24 to get it to you. We hope the volume will go up over time so we can actually make some money on it. And I'm kidding, you're sure, I know. But what's happening is the universe of films out there at Netflix, you pick what you want to see. On-demand cable, you pick what you want to watch. And another thing we find out, because I have lovely children and grandchildren, is that they don't care about cost. So pay-per-view is fine too. So how does this, so we thought, well, content will find its own level. So what we decided is let's build the place that this is going to occur. Let's build a common digital platform that you'll see announcements this year of 2 or 3 states going to all their students statewide. And what we built was a fairly sophisticated system that delivers any and all content to school districts and traditional school districts, to teachers in the classroom via smart boards or live boards, with its own built-in live boards, its built-in grade cards, calendars, basic electronic book bag. And then what we found is that school districts told us, and you can disagree, Teresa and Thomas, but here's what we heard. Wow, you have over 1,000 courses, hundreds of algebra courses, millions of learning objects. Wow. But could I ask you a question? Yes, Superintendent, what would that question be? Can we build our own? Can we build our own content? Well, why would you want to do that? We have thousands. Because that long tail says the school district in Florida or Georgia or Ohio wants control of their own destiny for their children, and they want education to be local. So what we see is we've built a place where schools are saying, can we build our own? And with the help of SAS, companies like SAS, I think Bruce Friend's here with SAS, they've accumulated some really great learning objects and lessons that can now be re-engineered into a DNA chain or whatever you want to call it to create lessons where schools build their own. And they found a way to do that so economically that school districts would be foolish not to try it. So a couple of things are going on. Content is being democratized, localized. And it's funny, we went from localized school boards, where the strength was locally, to centralization of statewide school boards. And because of all of the things that Karen talked about, and all of the things that Kate talked about, we're going to local again. You can have in your backyard what was once very centralized. But a couple of problems got in the way. High-stakes tests. How do you test for those things? Well, what's happened is a thing called standards. So then we were wrestling with the problem, well, how do we build a software product that will help a school district in Alabama and one in Nevada and Australia? Do we have our salesman here? Okay. The world is going to go to standards-based learning because of standards-based high-stakes testing. We can sit all day and argue, is that good? Is that bad? We can argue, why are our kids in tests all year long? But the point is, it's coming. We cannot improve as a society until we know what in the hell the problem is. So you're going to see tests whether you like it or not. So we then developed and built a product called Reactor. Reactor is a way to, within 3 clicks of a mouse, you can get to any repository, federated search or our repository, to standards-based aligned content or objects, or images or tests or lessons or assessments in 3 clicks without ever leaving the electronic classroom you're in. So you could be in front of a group of students in a traditional classroom. Word comes over the PA, there's a hurricane going to hit Tampa Bay. We can go straight to the hurricane, but we can also change and go through weather, objects, learning, tests, questions. So what we've decided as a company, we're going to follow the standards base, but we're going to try to make it easy for local school districts to build and augment local lesson plans, assessment quizzes to those standards, so that once again you have the local flavor of the school district and local control. But you also can deliver that content quickly and build your own if you like, or buy somebody else's if you like. That's been our goal, and we're achieving. The other thing is we've brought price down on it. Learning management systems, 5 years ago, we're going to $600, $700 per student per year. We've got the price down to about $5. So why? So that the public schools, not just the boutique schools and people that are here today, charter schools, private schools, national schools, gifted schools, superintendents kept telling us, we don't have money for technology. And we respond, we've got to make the prices cheaper. So the biggest thing we leave today, I think, is 2 things. We know that content will become democratized, I think. Number 2, I really believe there's a single word that defines whether we will be successful as a culture in the digital age. And that one word is bandwidth. Nothing else matters. We can build all of the sophisticated gadgetry, last mile technology, video streaming, software products, but if we don't get our children connected, we will not get them to learn. I'll give you a couple of examples. South Korea has 50% more of its population connected to bandwidth than America. South Korea. Argentina spends 3 times more for bandwidth per capita than we do in America. While we worry about studying children and tests and how we're going to, and all this latest gadgetry, what we're ignoring is we have a problem. We've invested billions of dollars in old, useless infrastructure. If I were to ask you, what continent is the most cell-friendly in the world? Would you say North America? And you'd be wrong. It's South America. They bypass telephony and cabling. They're straight with cellular technology. So whether it's Wi-Fi, cellular, cable, high-speed, we've got to get our concerns about how do we deliver to children the ability to connect to Apple and its suite of wonderful products. How do we get poor children in southeastern Ohio to connect? 2% of the country has yet to get telephones. The law in Ohio says that if a student enrolls in a charter school, you've got to provide them the telephony, the computers, and all that. We had one case where it cost us $12,000 to get a phone line to this house. And they were so excited to have a phone. We tried to explain that 28 baud would not deliver much of a computer system, but we did. The point being is this, is that while we wrangle on what are the right skills, the kids will tell us what they are. What are the right attitudes and values we want to instill in them? They're going to pick and choose. These kids are smart, in my opinion. What we need to worry about is, are we getting these children connected? If we get them connected, they will learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was asked to join this panel to talk about the relationship between technology and student achievement. It's an interesting topic. Last week I was having lunch with the CEO of a significant education technology company who remain nameless. And we were debating this topic, which is to say, now that kids have technology, what's the evidence that they're smarter? And he said, well, they're so much better at multitasking than the current generation. And I thought, well, every time that I'm at a meeting, all of my colleagues are doing their email under the table while I'm talking. So I don't know that, this generation's so much better at that. And he said, no. Like when they're watching television, they're sending text messages. And I thought, well, gosh, when I watch television, I read the newspaper. So, what's the better form of multitasking? The question of what difference technology makes for our kids and for their abilities, whether they're traditional cognitive abilities or whether they're the sort of the 21st century abilities that we talk about, this is a really important question. This technology revolution that obviously has swept every other industry has not yet swept education. It seems to be coming, but there's a real question exactly how it's going to penetrate education, whether it's going to penetrate education, and if it does, what kind of difference is it going to make? There's a scholar at Stanford University, Larry Cuban. He may even be here. I'm not sure. But Larry has made a career of writing very thoughtfully about how difficult it is to change practices in our schools. When people say, and they often do, that if Rip Van Winkle were to awake from a 150-year slumber today, the only two things he would recognize are his church and his school, because schools just don't change. So we began this presentation this afternoon with a picture of a radio and a television and a phonograph, and we could also imagine slide projectors and computers, because computers have been around for a long time. And folks have said, well, these new technologies are going to change education. They're going to improve education. But the fact of the matter is, there is no evidence that technology has ever improved student achievement. And so the question is, why is it going to improve things this time? Now, I happen to believe that it is, but I'll just cut to the chase. There's no evidence right now that technology is raising student achievement. There's just not. There's just not. All right? But will it? All right? Now I'm going to give you two examples of why I think it has enormous potential, and they come from they're examples that come from our experience at Edison Schools. Edison Schools is a large education management organization, and we've been working with schools, typically inner city populations, disadvantaged kids, for the last 15 years. A couple of examples of technology that I find really compelling and really promising, but they also illustrate the difficulty. The first is information. And if you ask me what are the two main drivers of achievement, the potential drivers of achievement, I'll say one is information and the other is instruction. In the area of information, here's the story. 10 years ago, when standardized testing began to take off around the nation, our teachers came to us and said, we just need more information to understand how our kids are doing on a regular basis. And at the end of the year, our kids are going to take these high-stakes tests. We're going to be held accountable. You're going to be held accountable. How do we better understand how our instruction is measuring up? And we said, well, maybe we could craft some assessments that we could give to kids on a regular basis, maybe even every month, to see how they're progressing against end-of-grade state standards, which at that point were pretty obscure. So we wrote some assessments. We emailed them out to teachers. The teachers downloaded them. They printed them. They photocopied them. They gave them out. They marked them. They rolled up the scores. And then we provided quickly turned-around reports so that they could see what kids were strong at, what kids were weak at, and so forth. The teachers, despite how hard this was absolutely loved it, but urged us to find some way to make it easier. So, long story short, in the year 2000, we created one of the first online formative assessment systems. And we've now used this system and built it up over time in all of our schools. It's also sold independently of Edison Schools. But what this system does is it provides detailed information every month on the kind of progress that kids are making on all of the skills that the state's expecting kids to be able to master in reading, language arts, math, and so forth. And the data have absolutely changed instruction because teachers can see how kids are doing, they can see what needs to be strengthened, what they can let up on. It's transformed instruction, it's improved instruction, it's made instruction what it should always be. That is, it's focused on a goal. It's not focused on a textbook, it's focused on a goal. It's really improved instruction. It's been a great thing. But there's an indirect effect here, and that is in the course of giving these assessments, it becomes obvious in the school which teachers are really successful and which ones aren't. Now, the positive of this is that it facilitates professional development, it helps bring along staff, but the negative of it is it may mean that somebody is identified as not very good at teaching, and that then necessitates a decision. Now, principals will say, all right, well, you know, we're going to have to do something about this ineffective teacher. As a management company, we know that we have to make those decisions, and we do. But the downside of this is that information technologies are resisted within schools if they have the potential of exposing the strengths and weaknesses of teachers. And this is one illustration of what the problem ultimately is, which is that technology is not penetrating education, not just because there are habits, but because technology is also threatening. And the more powerful the technology and the more threatening to the status quo, the less likely it is to be adopted. One little data point. Right now, with standardized testing being at all grade levels and having data systems that now can track kids from grade level to grade level, and we can actually look at individual student progress, which is really important for evaluating how schools are doing, we can also evaluate the progress that teachers are making, right? By knowing which teacher taught which student. And so now, accountability folks are driving hard to have state systems attached to student information, unique teacher identifiers, so that it's possible, and Florida does this as an example, it's possible to know how each teacher is actually performing. Right now, there are 16 states that allow unique teacher identifiers. The rest prohibit that, right? And if you want to know who permits it and who prohibits it, just look at your basic index of union power. Yes, union power in a state. And there is a correlation of close to 1.0, right? Technology is being resisted when it threatens the status quo, and information is one example. The other example is in the area of instruction. And whether you're talking about cyber charter schools, online education, where you have the possibility, the potential of a highly engaging form of instruction displacing teachers, it's going to be resisted. Our example in Edison Schools, we work with very disadvantaged kids. Kids who, in a regular classroom, often struggle, but also present enormous ranges of issues and performance to the teachers. Differentiating instruction is a quaint idea when you're working with kids in third grade who range from pre-K to grade 8 in their performance levels. You need to be able to differentiate. So what we did at Edison Schools in a couple of our charter schools was we created large technology spaces. And for our elementary kids, we gave them direct access to technology 1 hour a day, and for our middle school kids, 2 hours a day. And during this time, their instruction was completely differentiated. So if you were in third grade and couldn't decode, you had on earphones, you were working with a computer one-on-one, developing your decoding skills. If you were in third grade and were an 8th grade reader, you were reading difficult passages on current events and writing responses to that. This enormous differentiation allowed us to reach kids that could not be reached just within the regular classroom. Technology is remarkably engaging. It has a remarkable ability to display information in ways that a regular classroom can't. It's absolutely individualized. It does things that cannot be done in the regular classroom. But to make that possible, you have to give access you have to provide access to the technology, to the kids. And we did this by creating a lot of time in the schedule, lots of space for this to happen, right? It's really, really working. But it also has a side effect that creates resistance. These large technology spaces do not need to be supervised by regular teachers, and they don't need to be supervised in the same numbers. And in fact, in these schools, we're now using less faculty and more technology. Now, we've actually used that savings to provide increased teacher compensation to attract better teachers, but this is not an idea. This is not an idea that's acceptable to the status quo. So, my message about the impact of technology on achievement is simply this. There is every reason to believe that technology can improve the quality of classroom instruction, can improve the quality of instruction one-on-one as kids interact with technology, both developing traditional cognitive skills and new skills. There's no question about the potential. The question is, will the system accept it? And how do we make that happen? And that's the big question. Thank you.
G'day, I'm from Australia. I'm really pleased to be here. I'll try to speak slowly. In Australia, we do tend to speak more quickly than you. I've got a theory about that, is that we speak at the front of our mouth, and so our tongue goes very quickly. I'll try to open my mouth more and go a bit more slowly, so you've got a chance of understanding what I say. I'm Catherine Moyle. I'm from the University of Canberra, which is in Australia's capital. It's the equivalent of Washington, D.C., but about a tenth of the size. I'm also the director of a secretariat in Australia, which is called the Australian ICT, Information and Communications Technology Committee, and that secretariat is responsible for supporting that committee, which makes policies at a nationwide level for the use of technologies in schools, vocational education and training, and higher education. I just thought that to understand a bit about what I'm going to say, it might be useful just briefly to give a bit of insight into Australia. Australia is about the same size as the contiguous states of the United States, and you can see that it's also pretty much the size of most of Europe. But we've only got about 20 million people, so we've got New York City sort of on the coasts of Australia. That right-hand map shows the different states and territories. In Australia, there are 6 states and 2 territories. And the education and training in Australia is legislated at a state level for the most part, but we're in the process of a bit of a change where the Commonwealth or the federal government is also increasing its role within education. Traditionally, as I said, there are state responsibilities, but those state responsibilities for about the last 15 years is really focused on outcomes and frameworks. In other words, specifying what it is that students need to achieve. And those curriculum at those state levels are handled through boards of studies, and they're usually boards of studies that have people from the respective schooling sectors. In Australia, we have the government sector, but we also have Catholic schools and independent schools, and the Catholic and the independent schools are non-government or private schools. They're about a third of the schools in Australia, and the government sector is about 2/3. We're in the process, however, of moving to establishing a national curriculum board, which will specify the outcomes that students need to achieve right across the whole country, rather than at a state-by-state level, in English, maths, science and history, and they will all be underpinned by literacy and numeracy benchmarking, and we run testing at a national level across our different subject areas on literacy and numeracy benchmarking. the secretariat that I'm responsible for feeds the Australian ICT, the Australian Information and Communication Technology Committee, and its role is up there. It's to be able to enable students to achieve high quality learning outcomes and to be able to productively contribute to Australia's society and economy. Australia sees itself very much in a global place. We are an island. We're a big island, but we're still an island. And we see ourselves as very much needing to look outwards from our borders. And so we look to our friends in America, and we also look north and east. So we see technology as fundamental to our future. So the Australian ICT and Education Committee is a representative committee, and that's how it's constituted. There's one state and territory government school system rep, one from the Catholic sector and one from the independent sector. Each state and territory has a vocational education and training representative. There are 3 representatives from higher education and 2 representatives from the Australian government. So it's about a 20-odd, 25-person committee. It meets face-to-face 3 to 4 times a year. And we use video conferencing and teleconferencing for out-of-session meetings. 2008 goes down in Australian history as the commencement of the digital education revolution. And I'd just like to quickly take you through what the digital education revolution means for us. The government has allocated $1.2 billion for all Australian to affect all Australian schools over the next 5 years, and you can see there are 5 key policy elements. There's the National Secondary School Computer Fund, which is rolling out computers to schools so that students in years 9 to 12 have a one-to-one one computer to one student for every student in years 9 to 12. We are rolling out broadband fibre optic connections to all schools in Australia at a minimum speed of 1 gig, and that's part of a whole nation approach where there is a whole nation approach whereby in 3 years' time we anticipate to have 99% of all Australians with broadband to the home. It also involves the development of online content, professional development for teachers, and web portals for parent participation. You can see there that we're taking an integrated approach. We're not just saying you need boxes, we're not saying you just need infrastructure. We say that we need an integrated approach where content, services, infrastructure and support are all a fundamental and integrated part of what we need to do to be able to make sure our classrooms are of a 21st century standard. So the new investments in 2008 to 2012 are up there. Because I don't want to take too much of your time, and I'm happy to answer questions, you can see that it's the investments are for 2008 on professional development, online curriculum and technical infrastructure. We see teacher capabilities as absolutely fundamental to being able to make sure that students get the value that they need out of the technologies that are being provided. And so the government is allocating or refocusing a half of $225 million per annum on professional development for teachers. There's a national committee involved in being able to work through what that means, and it involves working with the deans of education, the heads of faculties in universities, and working with the key stakeholders to be able to work through what it is that teachers need to know and do to be able to use technologies in the classroom in an environment which is a one-to-one environment. So in terms of online curriculum, the Australian government is investing $32.5 million over the next 2 years to build digital content and infrastructure. We have something called the Learning Federation, which has over the past 5 years been developing online content, and that means rich multimedia and cultural assets. It doesn't mean putting books online, and it doesn't mean websites particularly. What it means is learning objects specifically linked to curriculum, specifically intended to ensure that students achieve the outcomes that they are aiming for, And those rich learning objects will now be broadened out with a further 32.5 million over the next 2 years. So in terms of online curriculum content, we have a series of high priority projects to be able to deliver that online content to the schools. And you can see there again, in terms of thinking about the infrastructure, that we're really trying to take an integrated approach to this. So an integrated learning environment that is based on technical standards, that we have a national approach to copyright, and that we think about things like e-portfolios. And I was interested that Karen was saying that 26% of employers here in the States are referring to things like Facebook. That's the sort of issues that we're going to be facing with developing e-portfolios at a national level. We're also, in terms of technical standards, we're aiming at getting scalable solutions, bearing in mind that each state and territory has really been working to be able to develop up its own infrastructure. Now we want to harvest that from a local level and be able to have a national infrastructure so that there is portability. Our main issue in Australia, one of our main issues for us in Australia, is that we are a highly mobile nation. Each year we have over 80,000 students move from one jurisdiction or one schooling system to another. That's the equivalent of one state in the students in one state of Australia moving each year to another state. So student mobility is a really big issue for us. It's partly related to the way that we handle our armed forces, and so there's a real issue about being able to make sure that we have scalable solutions and that there is consistency across the nation. But the question is, how do we assess teacher capabilities? So we've been in the process of developing up something called EdCap, Educational Capabilities, and 3 states, the Northern Territory, Victoria and South Australia, have been working on this. It's a system-wide survey and reporting tool. It's online. Teachers can log on to it and they can use it for professional development, but it also can provide the school principal or school leader with data about what his or her school profile looks like in terms of teachers' capabilities with teaching and learning with technologies. The high-level functional drivers for the development of the survey are up there, and you can see that really we are interested in being able to get a matrix of capabilities. I was taken yesterday by someone saying it's really about the quality of the test, because the quality of the test will determine the quality of the data that you get, garbage in, garbage out, as we say. So it's really important to have high-quality tools to be able to gather the sort of data that we need to be able to inform our decision-making, particularly at a leadership level within schools. So there's some of the high-level drivers. We have, I'm sorry you might not be able to see that at the back, but basically that's a matrix of e-learning dimensions going from the sorts of capabilities you would expect to see in a teacher who has reasonably foundational skills through to if they're showing leadership in the school. So that matrix provides a standards framework against which teachers can be able to make decisions and school leaders can make decisions about where teachers see themselves in terms of their online survey and their capabilities. And what comes out is that you get a self-reporting matrix and people can see where they are, and it can be disaggregated to an individual level, or it can be aggregated to a school level, or in the case of 3 of our states, it can be aggregated to a state level. Another project I just want to talk briefly about is called Measuring the Value of Educational Technologies in Schools. And the reason I mention it is it's a project I initiated, but that's just a by the by. It's actually it actually builds on the online survey of teacher capabilities, but it's an international project that we've been working on. I've been working with the Consortium for School Networking here in the States, with the British Education and Communications Technology in the UK, and with agencies in Australia. We decided that it was not possible to just have one simple, straightforward test, if you like, of being able to make judgments about the value of technologies in schools. And we didn't buy the argument that you would be able to make a direct judgment that if you use computer, you'll directly affect student learning outcomes or make that decision. It's like trying to say, does a pen make any difference to student learning? So we decided that what we wanted to do was look at a more complex way of gathering data, because that's the nature of what we're looking at in schools. And so we're gathering different sorts of data from a school. The intention is that it will provide data back to a school principal or a school leader about the status of their school on a range of metrics. The teacher capabilities is one. The total cost of ownership, in other words, how much is being spent on the computers, is another. But we're interested in values, so we're looking at the value propositions that schools are saying. What are the value propositions that are put forward for why technologies are being used in schools? And then looking at whether they are being met in those schools by looking at the teacher capabilities, because that's a reflection of efficacy, confidence and capability. Looking at the cost, because that is one measure of value. It's only one though. And then getting a cross-section of staff and interviewing those to see what they're saying, and reviewing their documents, their curriculum documents, their program documents and their assessment documents. And then we also talk to the students, and we talk to the same students that are being taught by the teachers that we interview, to see whether there is any consistency between what the teachers think they're doing and what the students say is happening. So, and then we put that data together and we get a holistic a picture of what's going on in the schools. I go from here to the Republic of Ireland, to Dublin and to Belfast tomorrow, and they are in the process of starting to apply this research method, and then on to the Netherlands after that, where they too are. So what we're doing is we're building up pictures from different countries using the same sort of data sets to be able to see, in a sense of a benchmarking way, where the different countries are seeing the value of technologies in terms of teaching and learning. So, as I said, they're the main purposes of that project. To enable, I guess the most important one is to enable data-driven decision making. So if you have good data, you can make good decisions. Some of the data that we've found so far, some of the things we ask about are things like, does the internet foster higher order learning? And you can see the different response rates down there. It's interesting that that the UK does not see it as affecting to a strong degree, whereas if you look at Australia, 16%, and in the US, the people that filled out that were part of this survey, 30% of the people in the US saw that using the internet fosters higher order thinking. So there are some views about the fact that technologies can foster higher order thinking, but that varies across countries. When we look at the sort of things that teachers are doing, with whether they're using the World Wide Web, are they encouraging students to author with the web, are they using word processing or presentation software? You can see the purple line is never, so there's never across spreadsheet programs, scanning, drawing and web authoring, but presentation and word processing softwares are heavily used. Now, I think there's a challenge there between the view that we use the internet for a higher order thinking, but what we're actually asking students to do is to word process. Now, that's a fairly low level sort of use of technologies, and I think that throws out the challenge, certainly for us and for teachers in Australia, where we're looking at moving to a one-to-one nationally, about what it is that we're asking students to do, especially considering we're putting a lot of money into using online content. So that reinforces for us the importance that teacher professional learning and teacher capabilities are absolutely fundamental to the tasks at hand. We're also looking at pre-service teacher education. We're looking at that whole spectrum. We're really wanting to make sure that we take an integrated, holistic approach to being able to include technologies into teaching and learning. And at the university that I'm at, we're in the process of developing a video database of case studies of exemplary teaching and learning with technologies. We're fostering digital storytelling, and we're starting to look at Second Life. Second Life is an online virtual space where you can undertake simulations, and so we have a bit of an issue in Australia. We have a generational change happening. We have teachers retiring and academics retiring, and not enough people coming through. So while we do believe that it's really important to have teachers learning in real-life contexts, we are also starting to look at the possibility of using things like Second Life to be able to have immersive simulation environments in which pre-service teachers can enter to have a go at teaching before they really hit the real classroom, and hopefully do any damage that they're going to do in a simulated environment rather with the real students. There's actually Second Life in Education Wiki, and I've put that URL up there. Here's some of the online environments in Second Life. I find it a bit curious that the sort of environments we've created kind of still look like lecture theatres. I think some of the challenges that we've got are, can we play around in Second Life with not only getting teachers to play around with how they might operate within a class, but for some of our more experienced teachers playing around with what sort of structures and classroom dynamics might be possible given technologies. Some of the challenges that we're facing are what are the levers for action to improve the rate of development of the capability of educators? What are some of those levers that are going to mean that we can get a jump from where we are now? We want to see a qualitatively bigger jump. How can we attract and retain high quality teachers? And so this conference has been interesting to hear that you're sharing some of those issues. And how can we develop a sense of vocationalism in new teachers? And we mean that in the sense of the altruistic, true sense of vocationalism and being a high-quality teacher for the love of teaching. And how can we sustain those people in our school systems? If you're interested in some of the resources, I've just put up some of the URLs. I'm undertaking a piece of national research at the moment on student voice, where I'm talking to students in primary, secondary, vocational education, pre-service teachers and early career teachers about their views and expectations of learning with technologies. The Measuring the Value of Education Technologies in Schools website is there. And a piece of research I did in 2005 looked at the relationship of school leaders to teaching and learning with technologies, and that URL is up there if you're interested. So that's a very, very quick skim through Australia. And if you're interested in, I'm just trying to get the, oh, I didn't like that. I'll just put the last screen up because, sorry, I'll just, this is a quick review to just test whether you're actually listening. There will be a test at the end. There's my email if you would like to contact me at all. I'm very happy to be contacted and to respond to any questions. I've also put up a couple of pictures of Australia in an unashamed attempt to draw your attention to an Australian Computers in Education conference. If you want a reason to come to Australia in September, the pamphlets are out here. So that from me is a very quick trip around Australia and what's happening in terms of being able to move our classrooms into the 21st century.
And I have to tell you, Catherine got an email from me. It was just a random email saying, I'm working on helping put together people for a summit. Would you mind participating? And it was just sort of back and forth, and she said, sure, I'll do it. So it's been one of those interesting things that in the technology field. I think there's a lot of us who have very common core beliefs about where we see technology needs to be going, and the student-centered approach. And it was apparent through her work and looking at the stuff that she had done that she was going to be a natural fit for coming here and talking about. And I do think it's exciting to look at what Australia is doing. There's a whole nation that's really addressing the issue of technology and making significant changes. And it goes back to the beginning of why we need to have a plan as just not a state, but also as a nation. Where do we see the digital content, the online stuff that can be accessible? How do we look at what is defining what a learning object? Just to tell you all, because you got a little glazed on the learning object issue, it is a big movement. It is actual content that a student can download. It can be without the internet. It can be on an iPod. It can be on an MP3 player. But it's a self-sustaining piece of objects in which students can learn from it. There's also things called media assets. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's out there that allows for choice, that allows for students to have choice, for teachers to have choice, and it allows for personalization in the classroom. And that's the trend that's going to happen that's so very exciting. So I don't know if we have time for questions at all. Are there any
I
questions?
want to get in a couple real quick. One right here, Kate.
I'm Cindy Youngblood, and I teach over on the Space Coast, which you would think, of course, is high technology. There's a lot of companies there, high tech. In 8 years of teaching, I really haven't seen this intuitive thing with students in understanding how computers work. I've had a web page all 8 years I've been teaching. We have a fabulous system in my school district of where students can access stuff 24/7, but they don't. I find they're very literal. They won't scroll down. If my PowerPoint comes up and they don't have PowerPoint, they don't know how to go with the free program. How do I help these students? Is there something available? I noticed you said there was no achievement. You objected to that. Where is this availability that I can get my kids? I can direct them somewhere where they can learn this stuff, because I don't have time in social studies to teach them. But I want to use this technology. My kids call me the James Bond of my school because I have more technology than any teacher in my school, and I use it every day. But they don't understand it. They really don't understand it. So where's the tutorials? Where can I get them to learn it?
You want to go? Go ahead.
Well, a couple quick things, just quick resources. Atomic Learning has some fabulous online tutorials that are free. But I think I would ask the students. I'd try to really get a dialogue going with them, because I actually haven't heard that kind of a reaction before, except to the extent things like, how to do formulas and spreadsheets and some of the really distinct skills. But in terms of, understanding how to navigate and access things, if they have a purpose, they'll figure it out. So it may be a disconnect in purposefulness or engagement or something like that. But I think that I'd ask them. I really start a dialogue with them, because when they need to learn something, they'll figure it out, and they'll know who to ask and where to find information. But I do think we still need, there's some of the direct skills that we still need to teach them somewhere in the curriculum. I don't think they need a separate technology class or a separate keyboarding class, but they definitely need, kind of integrated throughout the curriculum, a purposeful way of making sure that the skills that they need for even today are covered somewhere.
Any more questions? Okay, this will be the last question.
First, let me say, Mr. Lager, I graduated West High School in 1986. It was such a small world. Second, I like to say I have all of the I don't want those children. I teach them every day, and I love them horribly. I'd like to know, you seem to have them all online. You don't have them in a classroom. How do they motivate themselves? I understand that being on a computer is motivating, but I have to one-on-one teach a lot of these kids, and they're way behind on a lot of their skills. So how do you do that?
Very difficultly. 100% of them are full-time students online full-time in their homes. We not only are one of the largest manager of phone lines and phone companies in Ohio. We manage over 47 different phone companies, 12,000 different phone lines. But what we found, and also a complete computer deployment system, break fix. So a lot of statewide virtual schools are really inside the school districts. We're apart from that. Part of the results, although we struggle to achieve some areas of high-stakes tests, when we started for the first 2 years, we were in academic emergency. The second 2 years, and a lot of this was a direct correlation of the poverty and things we had, but a lot of our students seem to gravitate to it. When they can go at their own pace on their own time with their own abilities, they tend to do pretty well. Our second 2 years, we were in continuous improvement. We will make effective this year in a school that is the poorest in Ohio. I think the answer is that these kids are the last stop, but that doesn't mean they're not excited about technology. We were the first computer they've ever seen. A lot of our students are too tall to really go to school, or too fat, or too short, or too stupid, or too many pimples. Or we've had school districts in Ohio. One young fellow was bullied because of his size, and the school district sent him to 5 different schools in 5 years. So what we found is when you take away all the other schools are not always a positive experience for every child. We seem to get the ones that it wasn't. We have at any time 24, 30 kids that are terminally ill or parents that are terminally ill. We have in our school baseball players' sons, actors who have been in Ohio for a year, and we've had young ladies who have been raped as well as their rapists. So it's like we don't know what we're doing from the standpoint of how you wrestle all these problems every day. But we also offer a 24/7 help service, and if we were anything, I think we're a connection that they may not have at their school after hours. Our call centers field calls on hunger, parental abuse, so what we think is that if you can get them connected, they will find a way to motivate themselves because computers are, Apple makes the coolest stuff. If you can get them in their hands, they'll get motivated. The other reason, all kids really at the core want to succeed, just maybe not in a traditional environment. The jury is still out. Will we be able to do so in such a broad scale or capacity? I don't know. But 800 students who graduated from ECOT last year had to take all 5 parts of the state high-stakes test to graduate, and they look like everybody else's kids. We also graduated a student last year, accepted to all 5 military academies. Having been a Coast Guard veteran, I tried to get her to go to the Coast Guard Academy. She said no. She's going to the Naval Academy. So we also have those, and advanced placement kids. So I have a suspicion that if you could make a level playing field and get bandwidth to these kids, Chris Galvin of Motorola, when I used to lobby for their company, in 1980s told me that bandwidth will be the currency of the 21st century. Currency. And I said, what do you mean? Walking money. And he's right. Those kids in the 21st century who are connected and able to connect will have walking around money. Those that do not will be left behind forever. We have got to get the technology to the Apple guys and girls. Let them build the gadgets. We've got to get the things you've heard today, but if we don't get them connected, they will fall behind. The rest they'll figure out, and maybe we'll figure out, maybe we'll care enough. But the last thing is an army of teachers who really care. Special needs is a very critical shortage in this country. We have a waiting list. For some reason, they want to teach these kids. And for some reason, when you get an autistic child or you get a child that's maybe in a juvenile detention center and this computer is their way out or their only friend, they tend to figure it out. And I don't know what that science is. Maybe these smarter fellows will figure it out someday and tell me. But I went to Bishop Reading out west, and I went there when God was 3. Okay? Thank you.
All right. And let's thank our panelists for a great session. Want to remind everyone that in Fantasia J, we'll be having a coalition building roundtable. If you've been fired up by a lot of the things that we've talked about over the course of the summit, I encourage you to go there and network. It's in the large ballroom just beyond the Expo Center. And please don't forget to turn in your evaluations.